Hi, friends. Just a quick note before we jump into this week's episode. In Stride is brought to you by Ride IQ. Ride IQ is a first of its kind equestrian coaching platform that will transform your independent schooling rides. Ride IQ members get access to the private mobile app with hundreds of on demand listen while you ride audio lessons taught by top eventing, jumper, and dressage coaches. And since you like podcasts, the Ride IQ app also includes over 100 exclusive podcast episodes to keep you company during your hacks, your commute, your barn chores, or whatever it is you do while you listen. Membership is only $29.99 per month, and every membership automatically includes a 2-week unlimited access free trial. Get started by downloading the Ride IQ mobile app on iPhone or Android. On today's episode of In Stride, Sinead talks with 5-star event rider Lillian Heard. Lillian grew up in a small town in Maryland and was introduced to eventing through Seneca Valley Pony Club. After high school, she went on to work for 5-star event rider Jan Bynny while she attended University of Virginia. Her plan to go to law school after getting her undergraduate degree changed when she bought a very special horse named Share Option, or Whitey. Whitey took her on a different path. Together, Lillian and Whitey went up the levels together and ultimately went around their first 5-star together. Whitey is the first of multiple horses Lillian has brought up the levels of eventing. Today, she rents a barn from her longtime coach and mentor, Boyd Martin, at Windurra in Pennsylvania. Sinead and Lillian are talking about facing fear after injury. We hope you enjoy this episode.
We haven't even started and we're already laughing. So I'm excited for everybody to enjoy this next hour and a bit with Lillian Heard, who's joining us today. And she is in, where are you?
Cochranville, Pennsylvania.
Cochranville, Pennsylvania, the mecca of horse sports this time of year, right? Everybody's there.
That's right. Except we're all about to go to Canada for Belmont. So
I know the migration. We were thinking about going up there, and then we had one horse that got like a hot nail, and we were like, not going. But it's quite a bit of a ways from Ocala. It's a little closer.
A little bit further. Yeah, it won't be too bad for us.
So you are based out of Boyd's farm, right? Boyd and Silva's barn, and you live down the road. Can you tell us a little bit about what how long have you been there? How long have you been based there? Because you were in Maryland for a while.
That's right. I think it's actually been 5 years, maybe a little more. I know it seems like I just moved up here, but it's been a while. I rent a barn from Boyd. It's right next door. And I hack over and use this facility, and he's still my coach, and it's a pretty incredible place to train, even if I wasn't riding with him, but I ride with him and Silva. And obviously there's like just so many really awesome opportunities for training horses in this area. So I feel like I'm in a really good place to try and achieve my goals.
Yeah. I mean, that's pretty amazing, actually. I mean, I haven't been there in a while, but when I used to live in New Jersey, I would drive down and go cross country schooling at Boyd's, and there was always so much going on, but the property is so beautiful. For anybody that hasn't been there, he's got an all-weather track. He's got a full cross country course. He's got an all-weather dressage ring with mirrors and all-weather show jumping, right? Am I forgetting? So now an indoor.
And now an indoor, and like a really incredible indoor. So it's basically got everything that you could possibly need. Especially, I mean, the best part is that cross country course. It's really, I always joke to like my students, I don't know how other people get ready for these events without living at Windurra. Like, we cross country school a lot. I don't know how other people do it, but
I was thinking that this morning. We drove over, we took a couple horses down the road to the Colemans, and they've got a good cross country field here in Ocala. But I was thinking that exact same thing. I'm like, God, how nice would it be just to be able to every time have the option of going and jumping off a bank, or to, I mean, I guess I wouldn't, I'm always terrified cross country schooling.
Well, so am I. I hate cross country schooling. Yeah. But like, you don't have an excuse not to do it. Like, you can't be like, well, I don't want to put my horse on the trailer again, when really what you're thinking is, I'm terrified of cross country schooling. I don't want to do it. So you actually force yourself to do it when you should, because you can't get out of doing it. It's right there.
Yeah, totally. And the other thing that is really nice that I think Carl Hester wrote something I read on social media the other day, and he was talking about, he basically said that you should always have a coach with you. Like you should always have someone watching you. And I started thinking about it in different sports and different contexts, is that, yeah, like in professional baseball, basketball, tennis, like you always have a coach watching you. I mean, yeah, you'll go and hit some balls or do whatever, by yourself randomly, but 90% of your training is under the eyes of someone, making sure your smallest technique or your philosophy or everything is intact. And we actually don't do that much once you become a professional in this sport. But actually, you really seem like you're around your coaches pretty much every day.
Yeah, it's always good to, and like, even if like, I'm riding around Boyd, around Silva, around like all these other really great riders are always there. Eric DeVander's there, like other people's coaches, like it's just people are there, even if they're not actually watching me at that time. Like most of the time, Boyd's there, he's riding his own horses and he's laser focused. But just being around that, like I'm not gonna, like if people are watching you or there, you're not gonna goof off. Like even, like sometimes I'll be like, that's probably good enough, and then I think, I think I've only been riding this horse for 20 minutes and like Boyd's in the ring and he's going to notice if I stop. So I better keep going. Like it keeps you honest when the people who you rely on to help make you better are just kind of keeping an eye on you or noticing what you're doing. Like you try to stay the course and work as hard as you can to be good.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that's an underutilized asset probably here. I was just thinking this morning, I'm like, because I recently just had a fall cross country schooling and broke my collarbone and a couple of ribs. And I thought, when I mend from this, I think what I want to do this summer is just honestly a couple times load up my horses, maybe 3 or 4 times a week, and just go ride, with some of the other professionals in the area. I mean, I'm very fortunate that, that's similar to you. Your fiance is a upper level rider. My husband is a wonderful rider. So we're around each other, but also when it's your partner, it's a little bit different.
Totally.
You can't say as much.
Yeah, totally.
So just being around that has to actually be just equally as amazing as those facilities. How does it work with like your business and coaching and teaching, or how do you manage all of that in and out of somebody else's facility?
It's pretty it was hard in the beginning. We didn't quite have like a routine to figure out how can I teach all my students, and then Boyd needs to teach his shipping students, and then he's jumping and then I'm jumping. Now like Boyd and I like work it like clockwork. Every morning we call each other. We ask, what are you doing with who do you need to jump today? What's your plan? And we basically book out the ring. Like he goes, I'll jump till noon and then you jump till 3, or I'll go, I've got to leave midday. Can I do? So it's like, it takes some organization, but we like basically run each other's schedules by each other every morning in order to, because I don't want to be teaching some novice level horse while Boyd's trying to school Sester Leg, he was always like, let's just share the ring. And I'm like, I'm sure you might be okay with that, but I get so nervous. I'm like, I don't want to be here for this. I'm messing up what he's doing. And honestly, he also doesn't want me there for that. So we like basically put a lot of work in to make sure we all have the time we need in the ring, which is great. And then the cross country kind of works because
you have so much room. And like, how did you guys come up with that? Was that a vision of Boyd's? Was he like, hey, Lil, you should, I mean, I know he's always had other professionals. No, this was a vision of you. You had this vision. You're like, this is what I'm doing.
Well, I kept like, I didn't want to be in his way. Like, at the end of the day, I started as Boyd's working student and worked for him for years, 5 years, something like that. At the end of the day, he's always going to like be my boss, like that's what it feels like, even though I'm his renter now, he's my coach. So like, if you work for somebody and you're in their way in the jump ring, you are doing a really bad job at your job. So it made me so uncomfortable. I mean, I didn't put it that way to him, but I was like, I do not want to be in your way in this jump ring. And it's hard because I make my schedule the day before, or days before. I've got to tell all my students, and Boyd, he's just training his own horses. He rarely has a schedule in advance. So I actually think in fairness to Boyd, I make his life a little bit harder because he has to plan now and more in advance to tell me what he's doing. But now
you might be a favorite of his staff then. They probably really appreciate that.
I'm everybody. So it was more like born out of me being so anxious about being in his way than anything else. And now it's just so much better because we like can communicate and have everything. So nobody's ever feeling like they need to rush through jumping a horse, because there's nothing worse. Like, you know, when you're halfway through a jump school and it's not quite going the way you want, you think, God, it'd be good to just go back to that, you know, warm up vertical and spend a minute and figure out what's going on. But if you feel like you don't have time for that, like that's the worst thing, then you might as well not be jumping. So it's nice now that we have it sort of organized that way.
And were you the first? I know he's had professionals kind of working for him, but are you the first person that's really been and shared the property and had this? So how did that happen?
The place that he bought next door was like in an old sort of not abandoned, that's a little bit dramatic, but the building had not been occupied for a very long time. It was a school, and we call it the schoolhouse. And he bought that and renovated it into stalls, and I moved in like while they were still renovating it. I was like, now, I mean, I remember like he had just got the paddocks up, and I was like walking my horse into the field. So it was way smaller when I first started. He's like added things and built new things and made it awesome. And so I was the first person that he ever did this with. And it was more because he bought this property, not like him being like, oh, I want to have Lillian here. It was like, I have this property and I need someone. Lillian, you need to be here. But it was a very good move for me to go there. So we've sort of figured it out together. I think, you know, the next person that eventually goes into that barn will, you know, probably like Boyle probably maintain a lot of the like things that we've come up with to make it work, to have. And he's always shared his facility with Silva, so like he has some experience of sharing with a different professional, because Silva's got her whole own business, but obviously that's not the jump ring. So, you know, we had to add in, how do you manage two big professional barns trying to share a jump ring? But we do a great job of it now, so it's awesome.
That's so cool. So how big is how many horses have you got at your place?
I think I have 28.
Do you really?
So many.
Like too many.
Yeah. Too many.
And are those are those a lot of students, clients? Like what?
Yeah, it's mostly students. So I've got 7 that are like mine to ride and compete. Oh, well, 6. I was counting Whitey. He's 22 and retired. But no, he does. He flats, but I own him. And then I've got 6 girls that work for me, so they're horses. And then the rest of them are students. I think all of them are students. I don't even have any sales horses or horses in for training. Like it's all people that live nearby or live a little bit of ways away and drive up to ride with me. And they're all, you know, various levels, like mostly kind of prelim, intermediate, advanced level students. But I've got even like some lower level amateurs as well that train with me.
That's wild. And is that like a full board situation, training situation, or they don't
exactly
self-care? You
it's
manage the whole
like
thing.
you're all, I mean, I tell them what to do every day, write it in the book, like they're under complete LGH control, whether they want it or not.
They get it. I think that's awesome. I mean, it actually, you know, it's pretty unique now for people to really do that. You know, most people either have their small focus group or people are shipping in for lessons where there's so many, especially like in the young riders or upcoming professionals, young professionals that really need a program to be in. And since working student, like when you and I think when you and I really first met, I think you were working for Jan and I think I had just come back from England, but you know, you were in that program and then you were in Boyd's program, but you got to be like in programs for a while to kind of get the whole picture, the whole gist, take what you want, leave what you don't. And it doesn't seem like that many people are doing that now. So it's more now that you've kind of morphed it into that, where people actually still have their system and their days and their horses taken care of. And so they can learn that way, seems to be kind of actually still pretty unique. I don't really know too many other people that do that.
Totally. Yeah. And I think like, I have a lot of my students, they're in school, so they couldn't be a working student. They couldn't go like do that, even though they probably would love to. So it's a way to like get that kind of like immersive, like put it all in the pot, see what happens type of working student experience. But to like be in school or be doing like a lot of them do online stuff so they can go with me south. I think it's unusual because like there are a lot of professionals that aren't willing to take on this many people. It's not I think it's unusual because people that are riding at the top level maybe don't necessarily think they have the time to also have 10 upper level students wandering around the barn and asking for lessons.
I mean, I don't think there is the time. How are you doing that?
There's a lot.
I would agree with them.
There's a lot of unused hours in the day you don't know about. No, I think because they're advanced, most of them, they don't need as much hand holding. Like they can, if I'm gone, well, I feel pretty bad for them this month because I've been gone. I went to badminton and I went to Tryon and I'm going to Bromont. So sometimes they're definitely, I'm like, oh, gosh, you guys really need some more lessons. I better. But then like I was home this week and I taught everybody as many lessons as you could possibly fathom. So I try and make up for it. Sometimes I do think they definitely get less than maybe they should because I'm gone. But then like while I'm gone, I'm learning things, like going to badminton and like learning huge, painful life lessons, and I bring that home to them. So like, there's
a trade-off.
There's a trade-off. But yeah, it's pretty busy.
Yeah, that is awesome. Well, I circling back to badminton, I was sitting today and I was thinking like, what do I want to talk to Lillian about? There's so much stuff that we could talk about. And so I thought about the thing that's been on my mind lately. Like I said earlier, I think you were one of the first people I called after I broke my collarbone a week ago, because I remember you breaking your collarbone a couple times and you said, if you need any advice, give me a call. So I was on the phone with you quite quickly. And I think one of those things, that can have so many degrees of whether it's just like not a big deal to incredibly severe, like the range of falls that you can have it's so amazing, right? Like you can pop off and like there's been times that I've fallen off and like at the end of the day I've totally forgotten because it was like so quick, not because I'm concussed, but because it's like been so quick and it was so irrelevant. And then there are falls that are like months later you're still trying to recover from. And you went over for badminton, you were having like a phenomenal round. Barnaby was like peaking, like he looked so amazing. And then a silly, unfortunate you got off real quick before the end.
Real dismount on course.
yeah. Why did she just got off? And you have this fall after all of the work and effort and money and everything to get over there, and then you don't even have 2 seconds to think about it. You're back at Tryon. And can you talk a little bit about that kind of the mental side of that, and how you prepare for it, how you recover from it, how you deal with that, with your all the pressure that comes with like something like badminton compared to like popping off in your backyard?
Yeah, totally. So I've had not a lot, but my fair share of bad falls. The one at badminton was goofy. It didn't hurt at all. So I wouldn't actually classify that as one of the bad ones that I had to like figure out how to get over. More like get over my like disappointment of it happening and my like the steps that led up to it. Like I'm like, oh, I should have ridden that better. What was I doing? That type of thing. But I definitely have also had falls where even if they weren't that like physically bad, but for some reason the circumstances around them just like kind of stuck with me longer. Like whether it was on that horse, like I've got to ride that horse again next weekend and I really don't want to fall off again, or whether it was like, God, I've always been worried about that happening and now it's happening. I can't forget about it happening. And my students ask this all the time because obviously my students fall off a bit and they're younger and they get shook and I can tell they're shook, like anybody. And they ask me like, what do I do? I feel, or I just go, so I can tell you're anxious because I can tell by the way they're riding. And like, this is dumb and it's not really helpful, but it's 100% the truth. I just tell them like, and because it's been the case for me, it's going to go away. Like that feeling is going to slowly shift away. Like it's going to take jumping and jumping again and jumping maybe a bit smaller than you're used to jumping, or a little bit easier, dropping down a level if you need to, or going to kind of the easier event versus a hard one. But like, it will just slowly drift away, and it will, the thing that you needed to learn from the situation will stick with you. Like I had a bad fall because I left a stride out from a down bank to a skinny the first time I broke my collarbone. And like that is not going to drift away. Like do not leave a stride out from down. But that like feeling of when you're like jumping and you're like, I can remember that fall while you're jumping, like that goes away. It always goes away. You just got to give it the time to do it. So like, that's not really good advice, but it's what I always think. I'm like, cause you know, I still feel that like, even from badminton, he hung a leg at the jump and twisted, and he didn't fall off, but he fell down. I mean, I fell off of him. And even that, like the last couple jumps, I've sort of thought as I'm taking off, like, oh, make sure they don't hit the jump. You know, it's kind of with me a little bit, but that's probably a good thing. It should have been with me before it happened in the first place. But I don't, and I thought, I was riding a young horse this weekend at an event, and I was like holding it off the ground, like, don't hit the front of the jump. And I thought, don't do that with a young horse. They don't need you in their face. That's silly, Lillian. Right. Like, move on. That was a 5-star at 10 at a huge jump. Like, do not hook your poor training level horse in the mouth. So definitely you've got to sometimes think about, you know, not letting it take too far, but you'll take what you need out of it, and then the hard part will go away.
So like, well, it sounds like there's a level of, you know, kind of awareness that you're talking about, and listening to you talk, it's so funny because I feel like I often have like those two like people in my head talking back and forth, like the person that's thinking all of the like, oh my God, do that, and the other person that's like, will you just calm down? You know, like this, like this is what's really happening, or actually being able to like recognize in the moment that you're holding the horse off the fence and you don't need to do that anymore. Like you can have those dialogues in the moment and just cut it out, you know? Like I know I feel sometimes with you know, with sometimes some of my students will get stuck because they notice they're doing the thing, and then that's where the thought stops. You know, they're like, I'm doing this because I'm scared. I'm like, okay, don't do it then. Like, you know, like that sounds silly, but like, okay, so for your next, you've noticed it, you're aware of it. So for the next time you come around, technically put your hands down. Like, I want you to feel the mane the whole time that you're riding. Like, don't let your hand, you know, like my biggest tell when I'm worried about something is my hands like levitate as I'm coming to the fence, right? Like I'm like, down, you know? And most of the time, like you said, you can tell when somebody's anxious because there's something in their body language that is giving it away. And it's like, often if you can find the tell and tell that thing to calm down.
That's the thing we have to stop. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. It's like you can actually, you know, if you can tell your body to settle down in one space, it'll calm down your mind. Sometimes I find, like, you know, if you can do that, but it is really, you know, it's really tricky. Like this fall that I just had, like, you know, when you get hurt, you can't get right back on.
That's
you know,
problem.
And so like it's brutal the whole ride to the hospital. You're thinking I quit, and then you're like, I can't wait to get back on and go fix that. And then you're like, I need a different horse. I need to learn that on the same horse. Like, I'm never doing this again. Ow, that hurts. Like, you know.
Yeah, totally. I think like it's a rare, and it's not rare, but it's less normal that when you fall off or you have a bad fall that you like really can't get on for 6 weeks, which is the situation you're in. And that's pretty tough. And whenever I've had that happen, like I've just told myself, it's okay. You're going to get back on, and you're going to need to take as much time as it takes to get comfortable again. And if I feel that way, then, and I do this a lot more than most people, then like for my students, or even, you know, like my high students or even my lower level students, I'm like, I got to give them time. I'm also like thinking I want to get them back so they forget about all this, but like, you just got to be willing for things like that to take the time that it takes. And not like, I mean, you're going to have to sit there and let that bone heal. But then when it comes back, like, I remember when I did my first event back off of breaking my collarbone the first time on the horse that I broke it on. I was so nervous. And I said to someone, one of my friends, I'm just so nervous to ride this horse. Like, he's going great. I've been cross country schooling and there's nothing wrong. But I'm like just so anxious. Like, this is like real anxiety, which is unusual for me. I'm not a very frightful rider. And they said, well, just get in the warm up and just keep jumping the warm up jumps until you feel comfortable and then go out on course. And I was like, what? I jumped like 3 warm up jumps and I go out. What do you mean? They were like, just keep jumping the warm up jumps. Jump and jump and jump. And I'm telling you, I must have jumped. The poor horse basically did 2 cross country courses. I did 1 course in the warm up, but it was like, yeah, okay, I can just stay here in this warm up. I'm at some dinky event. They'll let me go out whenever I need to go out. Just stay here in this warm up until, and just by like taking that pressure off, I was like, I'm just going to jump this stupid log until I'm like, okay, I'm okay. And it was like a goofy piece of advice. And, but I always remember that whenever like I think about that, my students now feeling that way, I'm like, okay, just let them jump that 1 jump until they feel good. Because those things you're talking about, like picking your hands up when you're afraid, or, pulling, which is what everybody does, or going too slow or whatever, or going too fast, even worse. They're reactions from fear. And so telling yourself not to do it can work sometimes, but also if it's fear making you do it, you've got to get rid of the fear in order to stop you doing the thing. So sometimes the best way to get rid of fear is like repetition at a slightly easier thing than what makes you afraid. It's kind of similar. So it works at the idea, but it's slightly easier. So that's kind of, I think, the best way to like help your students or yourself sort of move past that sort of like fear that's linked to bad riding, that's linked to the bad thing that whatever originally happened.
Yeah. And like the other thing that feels like it attaches to that too, I mean, this is why this is such a good, I think, conversation for people to hear, is the judgment that comes along with that fear, the judgment that comes along with slowing it down, or like, like I got to get back out there and I got to do that at that thing and be brave, or else I'm, useless, or nobody else knows what this is like, can't show that, like you're really saying, like, giving people permission to just take the time that it takes, just slow down.
I think that's like potentially my job point blank as a coach, is like giving students permission to not be angry with themselves when it's not going the way they want it to go, or taking longer time at a lower level, or whatever the thing that they need to hear. It's like me being like, it's okay, that's not great, we need to be better, but it's like, that's okay, let's try it again. Like it's not actually like, oh, you need more right leg or less of this rein. Like that's part of it, but a lot of it's just like permission to not be running around like Boyd Martin, which we're not gonna be, or Phillip, these like super brave, super crazy riders. Like we can go at this at a different angle and with a different pace, and that's fine too. Actually, you got to do it your own way. It's not going to work if you try and do it their way, because you're not them.
100%. I mean, I think that's that. It's funny that you say that. It's kind of like, I journal a lot. Like I just like to scribble things down to get them out of my head. And like one of the things that I was really thinking about a lot lately, and I've read it in a few different places, is like basically trying to figure out like who you are, who am I as a rider? Who am I? Not because we are always saying who we want to be, like I want to be like that, and I want to be this good, and I want to be the best in the world, and blah, 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 blah. But it's like, okay, if you can figure out who you are, where are your strengths, what can you do? Like for me, I'm not the bravest rider in the world at all, but I really like working on technique, and I like repetition, and I like understanding the technique and the fly, and like and if I'm going too fast or I'm too nervous to think about that stuff, or at least have a clear plan, that tends to be when I get into trouble, when I try to be the person that just wings it and goes out there and it's like no big deal. Like that's definitely not who I am, but I've tried to be that person at times, because I'm like, well, they look like they're so laid back and cool, and I want to be laid back and cool.
I need to do it. Yeah. Yeah.
And then I'm like, I'm not. Laid back and cool. Which is so tough. And speaking of that, like, you're around that, like, Boyd and Philip all the time, and Ryan, the same thing. Like, do you think that there's something different? Like, do you think it's a guy girl thing? Do you think it's a culture thing? What do you think? I mean, are they genuinely that brave and bold? No.
No, I think it's.
I think for those of you that are just listening and not watching, Lillian's shaking her head left and right.
I mean, I definitely think they're cooler cats than I am, and probably a bit braver. But I think that all the internalizing, overthinking, how like we're like constantly overthinking, should I be doing this with my horse? Should I be doing that? Like, is this the right move? What's the next event? They're doing all that. Well, I don't know. I can't say about Philip. Philip might actually just be that cool. But I definitely know that they're like putting as much overthinking, anxiety into, it just doesn't come out. Like, it maybe just comes out in a different way. I mean, maybe not to the degree you and I do, but I think it just looks different, but it's all very similar, like there's just as much sort of stress, worry, overthinking going into it, because there's so many ways this can go wrong with these horses, like you get them shot on the wrong day, you miss the event, or you do a jump school on the wrong day, it was too muddy, and your horse loses its confidence. Like, so many little ways where you can be like, God, I should have done that differently. Yeah. That the longer you do it, the more you become these like overthinking, stressed out rider, because you're like, it's gone wrong these 15 different ways. I bet there are 15 other ways it could go wrong I don't even know about. I want to prevent it. Like, I want to prevent it. Yeah. So there's no.
I don't want to learn the lesson the hard way again.
Exactly. Yeah. That's what I said that to Boyd before my last 5-star at Maryland. I said, it's not that I want to prevent doing the thing I've done wrong the last, at all the other ones. Like, don't, lean at this jump, or don't, ride the dressage wrong. I'm like, I know I won't do those things. I want to think of the thing that I'm about to do wrong, and before I do it. So how do I do that? Forget like avoiding all my past pitfalls. I'm crazy enough. I'm going to avoid them. I think about them all the time. I'm going to make sure I avoid those ones. It's like, what about that one I haven't done yet that I'm about to do? How do I avoid that?
And how did Boyd answer that?
He said, that is what you need to do. Like, he's like, he said it back to me a couple times. He's like, you gotta think about everything that can go wrong, and you've gotta like plan, like do it before it goes wrong. And I'm like, I know how.
I know what I need to do, but how do I do it?
Yeah. But that's the trick. I mean, when you ride at that level, like, shoot, it's hard to. You can't. You can't always get it right.
Yeah. I know. It's and to be able to be aware. I mean, that it's a certain responsibility. I mean, to whether you're jumping, I mean, I think about it more and more now, like whether you're jumping even novice or training, like, and you're an amateur or young rider, like, it is a responsibility to take the lessons, to be around the people, to be as good as you can be, because like, you are jumping jumps, you are taking, like a horse and yourself and your family. When I was on the way to the hospital this time, I just felt like such a sense, not fear, but like I felt all these responsibilities. Like, I feel like, my family and my business and my poor husband is, like, I was pregnant for 2 years, it felt like, and then he had to pick up the slack during that time, and then I'm just back, and and now I'm off for another bit. Just all these little responsibilities. And one of the main things I'm like, I have to, that's when I started thinking about being around a coach all the time again. I was like that when I was in my early 20s, and now, I'm far away from that. And I'm like, I need to be around someone all the time so that, like you said, there's mistakes that I am about to make that maybe somebody else will see. Like
Totally.
somebody else will see it before I do it, and it's not like I want to like not be able to do things by myself, but I want to make sure I'm doing my due diligence, and taking care of these responsibilities so that I'm at a smaller risk. There's always risk, but just a small, does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I think, like you said, it's really easy to get into the routine of your day, and taking more lessons messes up that routine. Like for me, it's like, well, I won't be able to teach those 7 students I need to teach in the afternoon if I go take a lesson. But Ryan and I, at the beginning of this year, kind of made a plan together. Like, we have got to take more lessons. Like, we are not close to good enough, like, period. And we're not going to get there on our own, like somebody out there needs to help us get there. A lot of people out there. And so it's just like being like, okay, I'm going to push myself, make myself a little uncomfortable, driving the longer distances to the writing lessons or hosting the clinic or whatever it is, just to, we just all need to be better. Like, not just me or you or my lower level students or my higher level students. Like, there's no one that's learned it all with the nature of the sport. That's why it's so hard. And like, look, if you're like, I only have a budget to take 1 lesson a week, like, that's fine too. Like, it's expensive. That's part of the problem. But if there's a way to get more help, I've been trying really hard this year to actually do that. Like, whenever I'm struggling with something, be like, go get somebody to help you, because could maybe figure it out on your own, but you probably won't get the whole thing figured out on your own.
And it probably won't be so painful if somebody else can just tell you how to do it.
And you know what? This is just the bottom line is, when you're riding in front of somebody else, you ride better, period. So if nothing else, getting in front of people more often is going to make you ride better more often. You ride better more often. It becomes habit. It happens under stress. And stress is the competition. And that's the key, because if it's only happening every once in a while and not easily, it's not going to happen at the show, because it only goes at the show. Like, you ride your worst at the show because you're stressed out. So that's kind of the like thought process for me.
Yeah. We had a guy out here do a clinic that's pretty cool, guy named Josh Nickel, and he talks about like threshold. And a lot of people think about that just like a line, like it's just a place where you hit threshold, or then you've gone beyond threshold. And he talks about it like a space you have to get comfortable being uncomfortable. And the more you can kind of push yourself to operate within that threshold, like, that's where the learning is, right? And that's a little bit like, there's no way, I have so many students say this to me, like, oh, I just want to go this level until it's boring. And I'm like, I could go novice all day, and I still honestly really am not bored. Like, I'm still thinking about it. Like, when I go to horse show, I'm like, okay, I'm not bored, but I'm okay with a certain level of discomfort. I can still operate in it. And but like you said, like, needing to create spaces, or that uncomfortableness at home or under lessons or when people are watching, so you get used to operating with a certain amount of stress, and then you can start to recognize when it's like out of the ballpark of too much stress. I can't handle that. And that's when things normally go pretty wrong. But figuring out, you get so comfortable at home if you're by yourself, and you're like, I'm winning gold medals, look at me. There's no one here looking at me, but I'm doing it. Like, just creating that type of thing. And there's Ian Woodhead was down here teaching dressage lessons, and I'm sure it's like anybody up there. They're astronomically expensive, but I sat over there for a couple of the extra rides, and it was such a good lesson. Like, you can watch for free all day long, and you can, that's another thing. Like, if you can scrape up the money to go to the clinic, so many people, I feel like, go to riding clinics. Like, well, you teach a lot of clinics, I teach a lot of clinics. Somebody will come for their one lesson, and then they leave for the rest of the day. And there's literally 24 other people with 24 different horses. So much learning goes on in the day that if you can hang out, if you spent that $350 to do that clinic, if you can stay for the rest of the day and like be selfish in that, because that's that's what it feels like. You can make up, I do it all the time. You have all these excuses, all these reasons. I don't have the money. I don't have the time. I've got to go teach this. I've got to do that. But like, even if it's one day a week or one day a month or something where it's just like, will just work that extra bit, to
Totally.
get
And
it done, to get that learning.
I think there's like, I learn obviously a lot taking lessons from really good people, but I feel like I learn from teaching too. Like I'm working through a problem with a student and I can't figure out, and then we figure something out. I'm like, yes, I'm going to apply that to my horse. Like I get a lot from teaching my students. And so like, I mean, even if you couldn't afford to take more lessons, like what about, asking the pony club if they need any help teaching their kids, like go teach too. I mean, every level of rider can help another level of rider. Go watch people ride, go watch your friends ride, go, watch YouTube videos. I mean, there's like so many avenues for improvement that we all don't do because we're trying to live our lives too. But, like we've everyone who and I know, and anyone that's listening to this has sacrificed so much already to be riding these horses. Like there's no question about that. So if you've gone this far, like let's go all in and take this as far as it can go, or like at least as far enough that you're happy with the result. Like you're like, okay, I'm getting better this week. Like that's all we want. We all just want to get a little bit better. Like maybe not even this week, but this month. Like I got a little bit better this month, or I learned that one thing. Like that's what we are all trying to do. Yeah. And it's hard to do sometimes.
Yeah. And I was talking to another professional the other day, and I felt so bad for her because she just had a hard time with a kind of a going horse that's developed a little bit of a stopping problem. And, she said, I know it's going to sound bad, but I just feel like I'm never going to make it. And I was like, oh girl, like you're not. Like we never make it. There's no place called making it. I was like, if you're still looking for that, that's the problem, and it's like once you kind of wrap your head around there is no making it, that it's all about like what you just said, like just getting a bit better and about the learning and like trying to, like wrap your head around that. And then there's a lesson in everything. And as hard as it is to like swallow at times, like, but the learning part of it just has to be there. So was there, you talked about some tough falls. I mean, was there anything ever that you really kind of were like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to, get through this, like, or it just like the same thing, it just slowly kind of went away?
There's definitely been like some horses that I've thought, I don't know if I am going to be brave to ride this horse again. Which actually was never the case. Like there's not one I've like been like, I mean, I would have given up long before I was at an event with them. Like if they're, I don't sit a buck very well. So if they're like buckers, I like give up on that buck. I'm like, who wants to ride a buck? Which is unfortunate because there are actually some really good horses that also have a buck, but that's not for me. But there have been moments where I will be like, I've never thought, I don't know if I want to. Okay, let me rephrase. There are definitely moments where I thought, do I want to do this anymore? But it's not from fear. It's like from like exhaustion and like disappointment, like, God, do it like falling at badminton, like, God, how many more times can you screw up at a 5-star? Do I really want to do this anymore? Like that's where I feel like, and then of course I'm like, yeah, of course you want to do it. But that it's like the disappointment that gets me down. The fear part, that is like, for me, that's very horse. So I'll be like, do I want to ride this horse anymore?
Right.
And then I just go, well, let's back right up. Let's jump small jumps. Let's go down a level. And then I'll decide. And then I always just like get over it,
So I want to circle back to that because I think you said a couple of really interesting things there. One of them that you kind of glazed over, but I think is really important, is you said that your fear sometimes is associated with a horse. And that is something that is so interesting because obviously, like, you're fortunate, I'm fortunate. We've ridden and get to ride a lot of different horses. So we understand what it is to ride a horse that you're not fearful of. Whereas where I found where people have said, I'm really scared. A lot of times I'm like, well, you should be, you know, like that, like I would be scared, you know, the amount of times I've had to stop and think, would I ride this horse? And then I'm like, no, like you know, it's not, the horse is nervous or it's underprepared or it's not athletic. You know, so I think that's a really big point for people that are struggling with fear, is to really ask themselves, are they appropriately mounted, you know? And then that's a whole other, you know, podcast on how, in which we should do, about appropriate matches, and then how to, like, if you recognize that it's not the right match, then how to get out of it, because it's pretty easy to be like, well, I can't afford anything else, I can't do this. There's always a way out of it. Like, I've had a few on the chopping block this week. There's always a way out of it. And,
Totally.
so I think that is a really valid point. And then, like, talk a little bit more about what you were just saying, because I thought that was pretty cool. Like, or very real. It's like, almost, if you have a fall, it's like the straw almost that breaks the camel's back if everything else isn't working, you know?
Right. Like if it's just too much, for all kinds of reasons, you know, too much money. I can't be putting all this money into this, or all the time, or, you know, I have all these other responsibilities, kids and, you know, work or school. And I was feeling like it was too much anyway. And then I had a bad fall, or maybe it's just the horse is naughty and it scares me every day. Like those two things together, that is what causes fear to stop your riding. But I always tell my students when they're ever sort of in this place, because young people kind of get to this place pretty easily. They have a lot of responsibility. They get stressed out. They have to make this choice. What do they want to do with their life? You know, we actually, I remember that. And I count myself in a luxurious position to at least know, you know, like half the battle is like them not knowing. So I think they get to this place a lot, or every one of my students gets to it at some point where they're like, do I really want to do this? And that's coupled with, I also fell off, or I'm going to a level that kind of scares the crap out of me, maybe because the horse is not suitable or whatever.
Right.
And I always try so hard to go, okay, if you want to be done because you're done, you're not into it enough to warrant how much work and time and money, fine. Like, I want you to be done because I know what it takes to keep going. And there's no point in putting it in if you're going to stop at some point anyway. But if it's fear, can we just like go a couple more months and see if that clears itself up, and if the other problems go away too? Like, I never want my students to quit because they had the horses scare them. You know, it's like, well, let me, because I can work them out of that. I know how to do that. I've done it a million times. But like, if they want to stop because this is not what they want to do, it. Like, stop. Like, I hate the idea that anybody would feel like, you know, it's like, so there's this, I went to college a very long time ago and took an economics course. And if anybody's listening is an econ major and I butcher this, I don't care. And you're going to roll with me on this. But there's this, I remember learning this and I think about it all the time. There's this theory, I think it's called the sunk cost theory. I remember the way they taught it was that, like let's say you're at the grocery store and you're waiting in a line, and you realize the line next to you is moving way quicker. And if you switched over to it, you would be able to check out quicker. But there's this like human nature that's like, I got to stay in this line. Like, I picked this line and I'm staying in this line, even though the other one would be a quicker line. It's like this, like, it's a sunk cost. It's done. Imagine you're starting fresh again. Which line is quicker? Like, that is a sunk cost. So like with horses, like I think so often people are like, I've put so much into it. This goes to the whole theory of, you know, moving on from a horse when a horse isn't right on it anymore. Like, I've put so much into it. I can't back away now. It's like, no, that is a sunk cost. Like, let's start from here. What's your best way moving forward? Is it not riding anymore? Is it getting a new horse? Is it taking a break? It doesn't matter. Like, everything that came before has already happened and it's gone. Like, using that to tell yourself, well, I better keep at it. Like, I mean, there's certainly, look, anybody who knows me or rides with me, it's like all about like pushing through tough things. Like, that's horses. And I don't want to encourage people not to do that. But I do think letting fear stop you, or like thinking riding is dangerous, I would be hesitant to let that take effect.
Stop
you know?
Yeah, 100%. I think that's actually that's really interesting. And I'm going to hang on to that because I would find myself doing that a lot. Like you put so much into something and it's like, when do you call it? Like when are you just like, just let it go?
Exactly.
Just
Think about
and
that grocery store line. Think about that grocery store line. I think about that at the grocery store. Okay.
My problem is that whenever I go and get in the other line, that line stops moving.
Oh my God. No kidding. It's more complicated than that Econ 101 textbook make it sound.
So what I want to do, we always wrap our show. I think I sent you these questions. Is that we always wrap our show with these 5 questions, and they're a little bit we get to know a little bit more about you. So if you're ready for these questions, I'll start running through them.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Okay. What is the biggest lesson a horse has taught you about yourself?
So when I was probably like 7 years old, 7 or 8, I did this. I was riding my horse Motto. That was my first horse in a jumper show that was at our barn. So all our barns jumps. And there was this jump at the end of the course that you could either choose to jump or choose to not jump. You couldn't win if you didn't jump it, but you could, place. But in order to win, to get the maximum amount of points, you had to jump this bogey fence. And on this day, it had a Liverpool underneath of it. And Motto did not jump Liverpools. He had never jumped one. I think we'd attempted multiple times, never succeeded on this Liverpool, okay? And I did this jump, and so I walked the course. I'm like, can't do it. It's the Liverpool. Motto doesn't jump the Liverpool. Like, that's fine. I'm not doing it. Well, what do you know? I finished jump number 6, the end of the course. And like, I could not help myself. I remember being like, I got to try it. So I come around that turn. I line up. I sit back. I put my leg on. And Motto stops at that jump, and I fall off. I go crashing into it, and I lose. I fall off, and I completely obliterate any of my chances of winning the schooling jumper show at my boarding barn. And I got to tell you, I remember that, and I think about it all the time, because not all the time, but whenever I'm like, God, why are you doing this to yourself, Lillian? Like, why are you going to badminton? Why are you going to Berkeley? This is madness. Like, this is crazy. And it's like, you're that kid that took Motto at the Liverpool when you knew you'd never jump it because there was a chance you could win, So that horse on that day taught me like who I was as a rider. And every time it's like really hard to be that person. Like when you go to badminton and fall off.
Yeah.
It's also like, that's what can lead to success sometimes, or makes me even able to do this sport at all. So that's me. And it's good and it's bad and it's a lot of things, but he taught me that in that horrible moment.
I love that. But that goes back to what we were talking about earlier, like figuring out who you are, and you have a like defining moment where you're like, that's who I am.
That's who I am.
In that moment when you're like, why? You're like, because that's who I am, and you feel really connected to that. That's real. That gives me chills.
Makes it
that's
okay
really cool.
That you like went and tried the really hard thing and failed at it, because you're like, this is who you are, and that's a good thing too. It just can sometimes hurt too.
Then you just try again.
Try again, try better.
Yeah, I love that. Do you have a favorite training or competition mantra that you reference regularly?
So this was funny because I couldn't think of one. So I asked my students, I was like, guys, do I say something like over and over again, or like that's like a Lillianism? And they like couldn't think of it either. And they were like, well, I don't know, like you're just always saying like, I feel like the thing you say the most is like, that's okay, come again. And I thought about it. I thought that is like what I say the most. When you have a bad jump or a miss, or you try a shoulder in and you just wobbling all up and down the long side. That's the first thing I go, that's okay. Let's come again. It's sort of like, that's what they need to hear. If I'm like, no, that's not good enough, I know they're going to yank on the horse or be angry with themselves. And like, that's so counterproductive. So like my first line of defense is, that's okay. You made a mistake. It wasn't good enough. Let's try this again. So I think that's my mantra. That's okay.
I love that.
But it's okay.
But I also think that's one of those things when we were talking earlier about, like the guys and the girls and how they, how their fear or their craziness comes out. I think that we are so much harder on, like, we have 7 strides of, oh shit, that was horrible. I'm a bad person. I'm never going to get this right. And then the more time we waste on that, the further we're getting away from the solution. Whereas like, if you just like, that's okay. And then just back at it, it's much healthier.
My biggest job at that moment for my students, and I probably need to apply this to myself, is like, move on. Okay.
Yeah.
Harping on that. I'll tell you what you need to know out of that situation, but it's okay. Like,
yeah,
you're going to get it right. Come again, try again.
Mm-hmm.
The like screaming, it just does not work for most people. Yeah. There are definitely some moments where I'm like, do better right now. But that's rare for me.
Yeah. No, totally. All right. Is there a piece of advice someone gave you along the way that you still reference today?
That was a hard one because, like, I've gotten so much good advice from so many people, and not even like big, life-changing advice, just like little pieces of advice, which I never forget and hold on to, and then think about, like the sunk cost theory in economics we were talking about earlier. But, like Boyd, who as my coach is always given, he's a talker. So you get advice from that guy all the time. Right from the beginning. And maybe I already knew this, and maybe this was going to be me anyway, but he told all of us, and I think he's told every person that's ever worked for him, that like the most important thing that you need in writing is like not skill or talent or money or all the other things that are great to have, but it's just like that, like hard work mentality, grit. I'll just keep going until it gets better type of. And sometimes that's not going to be there, but whether he put that in me or Jan, who totally was like super influential in like putting that into me as a kid, like you're going to work harder, whether it was my mom, I don't know, but everybody's told you that, right? Anybody you work for, mostly because they want you to keep mucking their stalls, but also because it is pretty critical to be successful. And it's what's gotten me into this, and it's what's going to get me out of it. Like keep going is like that. Like it's okay. Maybe you're not quite good enough today, or you don't have that skill or whatever. But like, just put your head down and keep working, and you'll figure that one out. And then you'll realize you don't have some other skill you didn't even know about back then. Keep working at it. That like never give up, basically mentality, and that's what they've all taught me. All these people that give me very good advice.
No, it is, that's tried and true. It's just, and it's not like even these massive steps. Sometimes you're like climbing, like you're just one step dragging through the mud, but you just got to keep going.
I'll just
you do get the other side of it.
Like what problem have you not been able to solve? The one that you have right now, but like what old problem have you not been able to solve? Like you get through it all. Unfortunately, you get a whole new host of them. Like it's never ending with what we do. But you just gotta like keep at it.
I was reading this book that on the podcast with Tammy Smith, she recommended Relentless. Have you read that?
No. Is it good?
It's really, really good. But he talks about it that there are, like in his visit, there are no problems. They're just situations. Like everything is just a situation, like, which I loved. It was like, okay, if it's just a situation, then you don't feel like you have to waste any time going, oh man, this problem, or take it so personally. It's just like situation. It's got to be solved, and we've got to work through it, as opposed to it being a problem. Like you just solve it and move on. And there's so much. Like there will be never ending amounts of situations, and you just keep looking for enough knowledge from the people around you, or grab it from lessons you've had previously, so that you have the tools that you need to solve each situation. It's just like
totally
never ending.
And if you ever get to the point where you're like, is this one fixable? I mean, this is a really big one, which we like think all the time. This is a really big problem. I don't know. Like I like to just think back on things that I struggled with before and thought could never get better. Like, Barnaby running at fences, you know, like, is he just always going to be like this? And like, it did get better. Like, I had to put 10 years into that. Like, that was a long one. That was me playing the long game on that one. But like, each person individually has that thing that they figured their way through. It's like, think back to that, remember how that felt, and then be like, okay, I can do that to this one too.
Yeah, totally. Totally. Tick and I do that to each other a lot, even if it's like I'm sure you guys do this too, where you'll have like a day and it's just great. Like, you're just like, I am so lucky. Like, I ride horses, the sun is shining, we're in the best place in the world, I'm so happy. And whenever either of us are like that, we're just like, just remember this feeling, because there's, then the next day you're like, this is awful, we have no money, I can't pay the bills, I don't know what's happening, why are we doing this, like, blah 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 blah. And then you just remember, like, I've had this feeling before, and I will get the other feeling again, and it will just keep in this hamster wheel.
Totally.
And it's like just remember this moment.
I don't think that, and this is another thing, I don't think that's like totally unique to like I think everyone doing whatever they do is like, this is awful, this is good, this is awful, like that's just human nature. So like, just roll with that. Like, it's not just horses, it's anything that you choose to do. So like, sometimes that makes me feel better. I'm like, this is just awful. Like, I'm freezing cold, and I can't ride, I fell off, and I went to an event and just performed mediocre on every horse.
Sixes across the board.
Worst. It's not even falling off. It's just like mediocre is the worst. But then you're like, you know what? Whoever these other people that are doing these other jobs, oh my God, we have my weed whacker is here.
Oh, okay, you can't really hear it.
Anyways, sorry. Everybody's going through these feelings, whether they're horse riders or whatever. So like, it's okay to feel that way, because we're all doing it.
Yeah. Okay. What do you do when you are seeking inspiration?
Okay, this actually loops into something I was just saying. I can't remember. But whenever I am like worried about something, or not sure I can do something, like, should I go to this event, or can I even jump that like, sometimes when you walk a course and you're like stressing about that one combination, or a dressage, you gotta ride this horse, it's not very good on the flat, you gotta do this dressage test. I like always think back on a time where I did that well. Like, let's say the combination on the course is a really hard right corner. I'll always be like, okay, what really hard right corner have I done? Okay, oh yeah, you know what, 3 shows ago there was that really hard right corner out of that water, and I like remember doing it. I'm like, okay, I did that, I'll be fine. Or God, I hate doing dressage on Barnaby. He can get so nervous. And then I remember that test at, Kentucky, the one year where he was relaxed. I was like, okay, I remember that. That felt really good. And sometimes I'll even pull it up on video to like, be like, I remember that. Like, basically finding, even if it's not on that horse, like a different horse where you did that kind of idea well. Like, that can get me like being like, I can do that. Like, I just need to know that I can do it. Maybe I won't do it that day, but if I'm like, get my head around that I know it is possible, then I feel like I'm like halfway there. I just have to create the realm of possibility.
Have you had an experience or an adversity separate from horses in your life that you feel has directly influenced you as a horseman?
That question also like gave me some serious pause, because I like read it and I was like reading it. I'm like, separate from the horses.
I don't understand.
I'm like, when was even a time where anything in your life was separate from the horses? Like, I literally can't even think of, like, when I was in high school, there were maybe some situations that were separate from the horses. Like, my life is so
ingrained,
like deep down, everything to do with them. Like, anything that even doesn't have to do with horses. Like, I'm either coming from being on a horse or going to get on one. Like, like the question itself was sort of like disturbing for me, because I couldn't
that question. That's the adversity.
I couldn't even answer the question. Yeah, I was like, this is so crazy. Like my life is so horses that there's very little of it that is outside of the horses, and almost all of that is not adversity. You know, it's like the non-horse stuff is good, but what I did just like scramble my brain to think of is this isn't adversity, but like I have a really good family and really good friends that I have, you know, like maintained great relationships with and been through things with, and like that sort of like dedication and loyalty to people that I think comes from my family like is a very good trait to put towards your horses, you know, like loyalty to a horse or a program or you know, a goal. Like this is not always easy, but like I'm like, this is what I'm doing, these are my people, this is my horse, I'm gonna like keep working towards this. And I think kind of like my outside of horses life, which is really only my family and some friends, has like influenced my horse life in the sense that it's sort of like taught me to have like long lasting relationships that are bigger and more important than whatever I need to do that day, you know, and like thinking big picture, if that makes any sense at all.
Yeah.
But basically answering any question about any part of my life that doesn't have to do with horses was nearly impossible, which is disturbing.
That's the biggest problem of my life so far.
Thanks for giving me that little disturbing nugget.
But it's interesting that you said that, because before we got on this call, you know, when I was doing a little think tanking about what we should chat about, one of the things was like, what is that extra thing that makes you you, and what, you know, separates you from everyone else? And that's for everyone. Like nobody is the same as anybody else, but the people that can connect with the genuine them seem to thrive. And I think you just probably hit the nail on the head. For you, what separates you and has you thriving in this sport is that, like, the business that you've developed because you have good relationships, the long, like, I mean, the horses that you've gone top levels with, you've had for like their whole lives, you know, and it's gotten better and better and better. And your coaches, you know, all of that sort of thing, like you know your people, you keep your people, you're very loyal. And I think people then return that back to you, if that makes sense. Like it seems like that's a real big part of who Lillian is, and you've connected with that in a really good way.
Yeah, that's cool. Actually, I like the way you turned it back at me better. It sounds a little bit more clear and like a good answer. So,
well, who I am is a talker.
I would say
our words around. Oh, that is really cool. Well, this has been awesome, Lillian. We've actually been on the phone 3.5 hours with the back and forth with all of the technical debacles that hopefully our listeners won't have sat in silence with us through. We're going to go that's not who Lillian is.
Thank God it's not actually live, because this would be a horrible
She is not going to be the one to call for your Geek Squad.
Not call me if you got a problem with your phone.
I cannot. That is a real problem. That is a solution I cannot fix.
That's right.
Well, this has been awesome. I'll let you carry on with your Sunday afternoon, and this has been really, really fun, and best of luck up in Canada. Have yourself some poutine and strawberry beer and all that sort of thing, and we will be following from stateside.
All right, thank you so much.
Thanks.
I really hope you enjoyed that conversation. Before you go, I just want to let you know more about Ride IQ. At its core, Ride IQ gives everyone access to instruction from the best equestrian coaches in the world. It might sound impossible, but with Ride IQ, you get access to the private mobile app that has hundreds of on-demand, listen-while-you-ride audio lessons taught by top riders and coaches in eventing, hunter jumpers, and dressage. Here's how it works. You look through the app and choose a lesson based on your horse or a skill you're working on. There are lessons for green off-the-track thoroughbreds and nervous horses and horses that are behind the leg, as well as lessons that teach every stage of skills like shoulder in or trot lengthenings. Then you tack up and press play, and you have a top coach like Doug Payne or Leslie Law or Gina Smith in your ear guiding you every step of the way. If you enjoyed today's episode, it is always appreciated if you can take a moment to share the podcast with your friends and family and leave a review on your podcast app. The best way to support the podcast is to become a Ride IQ member at ride-iq.com. And when you do, we hope you're excited to see that In Stride is just one of multiple podcast shows on the app, including hack chats, conversations with coaches, and more. And lastly, I wanted to let you know that our friends over at Major League Eventing also have a podcast. And if you enjoyed this show, I think you would also really enjoy their show. Just search for the Major League Eventing podcast in your podcast app and give it a listen.